This is Paul Redmond, Director of Student Experience and Enhancement.
This is Gita Sedghi, Senior Lecturer in the Department of Chemistry.
Rachael Collins, Student Success Manager.
Kate Murray, Project Officer and Lead for the pilot of PAL. And you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this episode, we chat with various colleagues about the university-wide implementation of peer-assisted learning and what it will look like in the next academic year. We hope you enjoy. Paul, Gita, Rachael and Kate, we're really pleased to be speaking to you today. We're delighted to talk to you about the university-wide implementation of the peer-assisted learning and what this will look like in the next academic year. But before we get started, it would be great if you could introduce yourselves and tell us about your roles at the university. So Paul, if we could start with you, please.
Hi, I'm Paul Redmond. I'm Director of Student Experience and Enhancement. So I oversee a range of different teams that are all here to enhance the experience of our students at university. So we have lots of involvement right from the minute students arrive at the university right through to graduation and beyond into their careers. So we're all about making sure they have a fantastic experience at the university.
Great, thank you, Paul. Gita, if we hand over to you.
I'm a Senior Lecturer in the Department of Chemistry, and my teaching philosophy is to provide an inclusive teaching and learning environment for a diverse community of students. Therefore, one of the areas of my practice is in peer-assisted learning, or PAL. And now I am honored to be part of this group, and I am very excited about the support the academic staff will receive from our career and employability services to implement PAL in the next academic year.
Great, thank you, Gita. Rachael, if I hand over to you next.
Hi, so I'm Rachael Collins and I head up the Student Success team. And we focus on three areas: inclusion, experience and enterprise. And it's all about enhancing the student journey, ensuring that students feel like they're confident, they belong, and they're well enough to go on and succeed in the best way possible.
Brilliant, thanks Rachael. And Kate.
So I work under Rachael in the Student Success team. A major part of my role is to look at student inclusion and peer-to-peer provision across the university. So I've been working on the implementation of the PAL pilot, and I also lead on the Digital Coaches Accelerator programme as well.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Well, it's really nice to see new faces on the podcast with us. Gita, this is your third time on the podcast, isn't it now?
Yes.
You're almost as done many episodes as I have. Brilliant. It's great to have you all with us. I think the very first thing that I need to ask, because you've all mentioned it in your intros, is around peer-assisted learning. So let's just get down to the basics of that. What is peer-assisted learning? And then tell us why the university is launching this.
Well, if I start by saying why we're so keen to launch this, of course we have an expert in our midst with Gita, and Kate and Rachael and I have been talking about this for some time, thinking about how we know that the literature shows how effective peer-assisted learning is. There's some great literature which shows us how much students benefit from peer-assisted learning. So we've been keen to try this out and to introduce it. Of course, Gita's been running with a program really effectively that she'll talk about. So we know it works. We know it's really effective, and we've been really keen to extend the program to get more of our students involved. We want more of our students to benefit from this. And we've been just really excited to have the opportunity. And then COVID hit. And of course that it feels that we all had to work remotely. And that's had an impact on our plans. But there's a real opportunity now for this new academic year to roll this out and to get students involved. So we know it works, we know it's really effective, And we know that our students really benefit from additional support. So this cohort of students have been through a tough time, and we want to give them every advantage as possible when they come back to university, so they can benefit from it. But we also know, and again, Gita's perfectly placed to tell us about this, that it's not just the student who's in the receipt of peer-assisted learning that benefits, it's the person who's providing it as well who also benefits. So we think it's a win-win for all our students. So we're just really keen to roll this out this year in Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just build on that. So obviously, as Paul said, you know, the pandemic hit last year, and Kate was already kind of running a peer mentoring service, and this is a kind of natural progression, evolution for us. What we found was students wouldn't necessarily just come and reach out to us, but we found that by pairing them up through sort of PAL that was already operating, they would, as a byproduct, they would connect with students and get the emotional support that they needed during those sessions. I mean, we do quite a bit of sort of peer-to-peer work already right across the institution, and what we found is that actually, instead of being a passive recipient of knowledge, students, if they learn how to co-explore and take ownership and accountability for their own learning, this promotes responsibility, and this is a skill that we feel, you know, support them throughout their life, really.
And I just wanted to add that why now, in fact, in pandemic in so many ways has helped that, because one of the issues we had in the past was finding the venue and timetabling the sessions. Now, our experience in chemistry last year shows that it went very well online, and we had attendance was higher than ever.
It's really interesting, isn't it? We've done many podcasts now in this sort of format where we've been online, and many people have said, they've been explaining something to us and they've said, and then the pandemic hit. And it either scuppered the things that were being planned, or it really accelerated it and made it better in some cases. So that seems to be the case with this. So what are you trying to achieve with this? And why is it so important for the incoming students?
Matt, could I just add something to the previous question? I was just thinking about that in light of the pandemic and what you were just saying. I think people have kind of understood the importance of collaboration. So when I've been liaising with academics, they've really been keen to get involved because they can see that importance in light of what's happened and how we can work together. They can work more with students, and students can support each other, and how having that different channel of support can just really help and make things more streamlined in terms of like extracurricular support and, you know, assisting them with where they are struggling. So I think that's something I've heard a lot whilst I've been, you know, implementing this as well. So collaboration is a big one, and another major reason for me on why peer-to-peer support is important.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great opportunity for us this coming academic year to pilot PAL in a cross-section of different academic subjects. It's a chance to, you know, different disciplines, different faculties, to build on Gita's experience and to roll this out onto a wider range of academic disciplines. So that's what we're looking to do, to try. And we're so excited about it, and I think we're going to learn a lot from it as well in actually rolling this out, giving colleagues from different disciplines, groups of students from different disciplines a chance to try it out. We're going to learn a lot about how PAL can work best in our university. So I think in a sense, you know, it's going to really benefit students, but we'll also learn from this year. I think we're going to learn a lot from it here. So I think there's lots of benefits from us, you know, in that respect. So yeah, the time is right, I think, for us, you know, to roll this out now, and particularly, as I said again, for our incoming students, who we know they've missed chunks of their sixth form experience. They've had some challenges. So the more we could do to make them feel confident, to make them feel involved with other students, to make friends with other students, to really have a strong sense of belonging. That's what we're really keen to do. And we know from the research, from Gita's experience, we know that this is a great way of doing that.
Yeah, and we want students to have the same experience across the board. So as we've already mentioned, there are really good examples of it operating successfully across the institution, but not all students have access to this. And we know that there is a need. So, that's really important that we're offering the same experience to everybody. And I also think, this peer and collaborative learning helps to foster creativity, experimentation, problem solving, learning new concepts. And students can do this in a kind of non-threatening environment, somewhere where they feel comfortable and they're able to kind of ask those questions that they might be too worried to ask maybe an academic supervisor.
So Rachel, can I just pick up on that? You said earlier it's about supporting struggling students, and you mentioned the word emotional. So is it to do with their kind of emotional support, or is it support around the discipline specific questions that they might feel nervous about asking an academic about? What kind of support are we talking about?
So it is academic support, and we'll have specific modules that the students will focus on, which Kate and Gita will probably talk a bit more about later. But as a byproduct, what we find is that students can actually gain emotional support. So they might ask those questions that they wouldn't necessarily just come up and ask one of our peer mentors that they've not had any kind of engagement with previously, or they can't kind of relate to. This is a peer that they can relate to. They have there's sort of like a conversation that is already begun about their academic work, but they could ask questions around where's good to go in Liverpool, or questions around where how do you join societies, things like that, which will kind of just break down so many barriers. So it's primarily the academic, but as a byproduct, it's the emotional.
There's one point that Paul made around sixth form. My daughter's in that category. She's had a difficult experience at college, traveling, trying to get a bus, which only had 5 seats available, being one of them. And then the experience of being in a college and not really having the same experience as, people that have been older than her. So that thing around belonging makes a load of sense when you come to university, to have that sort of connection to people. So is the scheme aimed at supporting first years only?
Matt, so in answer to that question, for the pilot specifically, we have chosen to focus on first year students. This is just so that we can get a really good measurable outcome, and we can really rate the success of the programme for the first year running. However, it is a pilot, so we would look to expand upon that provision. And, in years to come, we'd like to be providing that level of support to all students, including undergraduate and PG students as well. So certainly first years for this year, but definitely looking to expand upon that. And also, I'm open to hearing from academics if they know that there's some provision needed within a particular module in terms of how we can kind of implement that next academic year as well.
So I can very much see the benefit of this programme for the students, but also as a previous academic, I can really see the benefit for the academics themselves in terms of giving that next level of support that we all want to give our students. So Kate, can you tell us about the academic lead for the programme? Should this necessarily be the module leader, for example?
Yes, so a good question. I know in the guide we have referred to the academic lead as someone who knows about the module. Ideally, though, it would be the module leader. So in this instance, we have geography and planning on board. We have physics, economics and law. This is for the pilot year. And all module leaders are acting as the academic lead. I feel like this really helps, particularly for the pilot, because it allows them to kind of ascertain the course materials that they'd like to share with students, those areas where students have been struggling as well. As part of this implementation, we did reflect on those areas with the academics to kind of specify what would be the best module in terms of support area for students with the pilot. So we do feel like the academic lead is best suited. However, if there needed to be some flexibility in terms of resource or lack of resource in a particular school, and they needed someone else to get on board. The whole point of peer assisted learning is that it is flexible, so we would be open to that as well. It's not kind of rigid and set in stone.
Sorry, also this is possible to do it, having academic lead as a module leader the next academic year, but when the scheme extends and covers more modules, it's not possible. However, this is the best approach, as Kate says, because 10 years ago when I started this scheme, I started with my module, with challenging module, mathematics, one is challenging for chemistry students, and now it covers all year one modules. So it doesn't matter if now I'm the module leader or not as an academic. But in first instance, when we start from small scale is helpful.
Fantastic. And then there's a number of other roles, aren't there, Gita, that support that academic lead. So in your documentation, you talk about the PAL coordinators, the subject leaders, the PAL leaders. Could you tell us a bit more about those roles, please?
Yeah, as Kate said, this is not like the structure we say everyone should follow that, but this is something it has worked the past 10 years in chemistry and other departments within the University of Liverpool and outside, but it could be tailored to the requirement of each department. We have PAL coordinators, subject leaders, and leaders. PAL coordinators basically coordinate the whole scheme. Their duties are to liaise with all leaders and participants, assign each session to 1 or 2 subjects, allocate enough leaders to each session, to get subject leaders to prepare the session plans, to inform the academic lead of any issues and suggested changes. They observe PAL sessions, they collect attendance data, etc. And usually we have 2 PAL coordinators. Again, it could be more. I worked with 2 PAL leaders and 1 year 6 PAL leaders, but the best approach was having a pair coordinating the scheme. And then subject leaders, they are usually year 3 experienced leaders who organize the preparation and updating of session plans, and they liaise with student coordinators regularly. We usually assign 2 subject leaders to each modules. And finally, leaders are year 2, 3, and 4 students who've completed PAL training. They prepare for sessions and they facilitate discussions in sessions for lower year students. And the number of leaders depend on the size of the cohort.
Fantastic. So all of those roles are student roles, Gita, and I think it's brilliant the impact that having those roles would have for those students. But I wondered if you could just tell us about some of your experience of the impact that this scheme has had on those students in terms of the development of their, we've been told, haven't we, Matt, not to use the word soft skills because they're all skills, but those additional skills away from the kind of discipline-specific learning.
It's very important, like the enhance for leaders and coordinators to enhance their employability skills, transferable skills, and especially leadership skills. So I can tell you, I wanted to say later, but that's I think a time to include that it's one of the approaches, one of the importance of this scheme is enhances the leaders' employability, and I use every opportunity to enhance this skill. For example, I ask students for applications or expression of interest to recruit them as leaders. After a year of leadership experience, I ask students to step in to become a subject leader when they have more experience, and then they can apply for coordination of the scheme later on. I believe this leadership progression path from a leader to subject leader to coordinator enhances students' employability and what they're gonna experience later on in real life. So that's one of the important aspects of PAL for leaders. That's
great. And I see from the documentation that the PAL coordinator is listed as the year 4 role. So in some schools, for example, like Ulm's, the year 4 roles only exist if a student has done a year in industry. So does that still work for 3rd year students if that's their final year?
Yeah, definitely it does. Our chemistry coordinators are year 4 students because they are the most experienced students. Of course, they could be year 3 students in other departments. And as I said, my rationale was like to have like a progression path for leadership for students. So if in one department, year 3 students are the most experienced, yes, of course, they can be PAL coordinators.
Great. And I guess that then works down in terms of the subject leads and the PAL leads. It just depends on the profile of the program that you're working with.
Yes, for subject leader is a bit different. In theory, yes, they can be from any year. And the structure of PAL in chemistry is suggested to colleagues to ensure they have a format they can work with, and they can tailor this structure to the requirement of the program, department, and the students. In my experience, there are some key elements like timetabling or session plan. It has to be done. Other things can be adopted. For example, having year 3 coordinators instead of year 4. However, about a subject leader, I recommend assigning year 3 students as subject leader, not year 2, because year 2 students are new to the scheme. They need 1 year to gain confidence and expertise in the scheme before becoming a subject leader. Nevertheless, if there are some students who have the knowledge, skills, and confidence in their year 2 who want to be a subject leader, I don't see a problem.
I'm just going to throw a question out to everybody. When we're talking about the PAL leaders and subject leaders, what are we talking in terms of the time commitment from those students?
I would say because we have a split duties between 3 groups of leaders, they need about a couple of hours per week, coordinators, subject leaders, or leaders themselves, because we have a split duties between them.
Yeah, we've certainly recommended that it's a few hours per week. However, we do have to bear in mind that they are students and they are studying. So a major part of the training that I deliver will be around, commitments, expectations, and how they can manage their time, and most importantly, who they can go to if they need more support. Rachael will agree with me on this. It's as much about their well-being as it is their peers and their fellow students. So we'll ensure that effective communication, effective training takes place, so they're aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing. If they were getting inundated with queries, someone else would need to kind of step in there and support them. So they need to know who they need to go to, whether that be the academic lead or ourselves. We're always there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kate. And I think we do a general session on when to refer. So anything could crop up in these sessions, and students need to know what their boundaries are and who they should be referring the students to. And as Kate said, their well-being is as important, and we don't want anyone to have any kind of burden on them placed by a peer. So that is very much involved in the training that Kate will offer.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because I was thinking the students have obviously got a lot on the plate. So adding a couple of hours in isn't like a huge onerous thing. But I guess what the benefits are obvious, aren't they? Because we've already talked about those soft skills, for want of a better word, but time management and organization and all those things will just come out of those as well. So yeah, I think it's really important. That also leads me on to another question. And so talking about those roles, if we've got a smaller group of students, can those roles be condensed into one? And I'm talking about PAL leaders, subject leaders, PAL coordinators.
Yes, certainly. So going back to that flexibility of the programme and it being the pilot, we were really keen to work with economics. They had a clear understanding of the programme, but they also felt that given they had a smaller cohort of students, just for ease of access and to make it as streamlined as possible, they thought it'd be more beneficial if basically the 3 roles were amalgamated into one. They felt that students would get more support if it worked like this, and then that students would be more likely to apply as well. So after a long meeting with them and trying to kind of figure out the best way that it would work, we came to the conclusion that that would be okay in this instance. So I think they would be working with a particularly small number. So the PAL leaders in this instance will take on the role of subject lead and PAL coordinator and work closely with the academic leads as well. That's important. So Alessandro, who will be their academic lead, is really keen to kind of get on board and support them as much as possible. And he will probably have more contact with them, given that it's such a small number.
What numbers are we talking in relation to that example, Kate?
Yeah, so in relation to economics, we're talking about 40 students. However, they said it might be more 20 students that get involved with the pilot.
Right.
So at max 40, but most likely 20 students.
Okay, yeah, it's good to know the sort of size of the numbers involved there, isn't it? Especially when you're condensing that role down.
Yeah.
Great. It sounds, Kate, that you very much want to make the programme bespoke to each school or each department or each programme that it's going to be running in. So in terms of the approach to the subject matter covered in each of the sessions, will that also be adapted to meet the needs of the school or the module?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 2 responses I can give there. So for the former part of what you were just talking about, I think it's important to emphasise that it should be bespoke. We want to see peer-assisted learning across the whole university. At the moment, this is a central offer in terms of the pilot, but when we see it expand, or what we'd like to see it expand, it's got to be bespoke because it's got to fulfil the needs of whatever school is involved. And whatever course, they all have different requirements, different needs. So certainly, yes, happy for it to be bespoke. In terms of your second question and the course content and what's covered in the sessions, again, it does very much depend on the nature of the subject. So obviously in science and engineering, we're more likely to see it being very specific, probably more quantitative, whereas with HSS, so we've got economics and law on board. When I've met with the academics, they've spoken about, potentially 10 questions covering a specific subject matter for students to expand upon, PAL leaders rather, and then it could be more discussion based as well. And also that can then be fed back to the academic lead in terms of how the students have improved in terms of their understanding of that content. Certainly, whatever format, it could be that students work, we've spoken about this briefly as well. I think I spoke about with one of the previous PAL leaders. It's that group effort. It could be that they make notes together on post-its and kind of stick ideas on the wall. We very much want it to be as creative as possible, whatever's best for the students. Gita, I'm not sure if you can expand on that as well.
I completely agree. And every year we've run it in the past 10 years, and every year we change the scheme because new coordinators come in, step in, and they have their initiative. I'm always open to suggestions, and after all, if the scheme they run for students. And also in ID departments, already they run it in at University of Liverpool. We have different formats, different structures. Some of them, they even adopted dropping sessions instead of a whole structure, PAL sessions. Although I always recommend a structured session for PAL.
Yeah, that's important actually. Just to highlight what Gita said, again, going back to the training, we will be training all of the PAL roles in terms of how to structure a session with students. Structure is so important. We want there to be a learning outcome at the end of these. That's the main purpose. So we need to ensure that structure's in place so that they can outline, correctly with the students what to expect, what they'll gain from the session. so that if they don't gain that, they can say, listen, I need more support. This isn't really working for me. And we feel that because it is peer-led, they'll be able to do that with their fellow students, because it should be more informal. It should be more of a conversational piece around that, I think.
Yeah, so it's informal, but what you're doing is putting the scaffolding around them to be able to do that confidently, I guess. And obviously you'll be the sounding board if they need to come back to anybody about session plans and etc.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of session plans, in terms of content, I can't claim to be an engineer or a scientist. I'm certainly not. So we would definitely say then go back to the academic, but we would always be in communication with the academics as well. It's not, it can't be too onerous on the students.
Yeah, nobody's left, are they? It seems like it's a well-supported idea.
Yeah.
So previously, we mentioned the time and the time commitment for PAL leaders. Is there any way that time can be formally recognised?
Yeah, so in fact, we have the HERE accreditation in place for the programme. We've just put this to My Liverpool and they've approved it. So basically, each student has to participate in 7 hours worth of activity in any given scheme. And obviously, they will definitely commit to 7 hours with peer assisted learning. And then at the end of their time at the university, so at the end of their undergraduate degree, the HERE accreditation will then be on their student transcript. It's not that it's just an accreditation though. I feel like with the HERE, it gives the students an opportunity to reflect on those skills. So we were talking about professional skills. When they have those interviews with employers, it's a documentation that they can look upon to see, actually, I gained leadership skills, I gained listening skills. I'm now able to reflect and articulate on that experience on a professional level. So I think it also gives them that opportunity as well. It's not another accreditation, it's also another experience for them to talk about.
Yeah. And that's what employers are really interested in an interview, isn't it? The story that goes behind that little sentence in the CV that said, I supported this, that, and the other, and I helped with these leadership attributes. They want to know how that was done and why that was done and what was the outcome of it. So they're really interested in those stories, which this definitely provides for them.
We met with various PAL leaders, didn't we, Rach, when we were implementing the scheme in the early days, and it was so evident how they could articulate those skills to us and how beneficial they found it. I think that was the one thing we really noticed when we were talking with them.
I think it really bolsters their own confidence in general. And then obviously with that, they then go on and use that to their advantage.
Kate, that all sounds really interesting. And you're launching this all this September 2020. So what's your next step? What's the first thing that you're going to do to launch the programme and the pilot programme?
Yeah, so I should emphasise that there's 2 facets to the pilot. So we have economics and law commencing the pilot in September. And from January, it will be physics and geography and planning taking part in the scheme. We were really keen to ensure that students got the chance to meet with each other. Obviously, after all, it is peer-assisted learning, so that's really vital. That we felt that it was a virtual programme, so we are having the sessions run virtually, but for the first meet, we want that to be in person. So we've worked with academics to finalise dates in their calendars, whether they can meet with students and students can meet with each other, so that they can put a face to a name, and so that when the sessions start, they feel comfortable enough to work with each other and ask questions as well. So we have 2 in-person events taking place during Welcome Week for law and economics. So the law session will take place on the Friday, I believe, and the economics session will take place on the Thursday. So that's 23rd and 24th of September. For the science and engineering subjects, those dates are yet to be finalised, but academics are really keen and also feel it's vital for them to meet with students and for students to interact with each other as well in person. So we will be finalising dates for them in due course.
So in our reading list for the podcast, we've got a lot of resources. I've seen we've got the guide will be in there, but is there anything else that the students can access?
Yeah, certainly feel that resources are a major part of any peer-to-peer programme. I know with all our peer-to-peer provision, we ensure that there's, a vast amount of resources for students to refer to at all times. And that was really evident with the peer mentoring programme that I was leading on in previous years with our career coaches, which Rach will agree with, and our digital coaches in the Digital Accelerator programme. So we didn't want it to be any different with PAL. And obviously from running peer mentoring, I already had a lot of resources that I could share with students that were particularly relevant in terms of offering peer-to-peer support to fellow students. So all that will be included. Any training that we deliver will be included as well. And it will all be shared on our PAL hub. So we've been working very closely with Joe Stanley, who's a previous PAL leader and has worked very closely with Gita. And he has coordinated, as a Canvas coach, he has coordinated and put together this brilliant set of pages for us, all dedicated to this PAL pilot scheme. So each subject area will have a dedicated page that students can go to. Some resources will be generic, some will be provided by academics as well. And this is a place where all course materials will be shared. So PAL leaders can go to that specific area to kind of figure out what they're going to be talking about that specific week. I mean, they'll have those conversations with subject leads too. However, it's just another place and another way of accessing information. For us, it needs to be as accessible as possible, and everyone learns in different ways. So if they can always go back to a piece of training, to a resource, and look at it in their own time when it's convenient for them, that's important. So yeah, all resources will be on there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And we'll definitely make a link to that in the show notes as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues. It's been really interesting chatting to you and hearing about this programme. And I know, Gita, we talked a little bit about your work around PAL in our other podcast with you around your National Teaching Fellowship. So listeners might want to listen to that podcast as well. Maybe you'll come back and in a year's time and tell us how your pilot has gone. We would love to hear the impact that this has. There seems to be such value for the students involved. So it would be really exciting to hear how it goes this year. This podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we love to finish each recording with 3 or 4 kind of take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So to end, if you could give us a tip each to reflect on in relation to your practice, what would it be? Paul, if we could start with you, please.
Sure. So I think one thing that we really have to focus on this coming year is student mental health and well-being. And I've been looking at the NHS 5 steps to mental well-being, and I think peer-assisted learning ticks off at least 4 of those. So connect to other people, tick. Learn new skills, tick. Give to others. Yeah, sure. People are actually supporting other students, and pay attention to the present moment. I think there's something about that. It grounds students in the present moment. So I think it's a great way of helping student well-being and particularly mental health well-being. The only ways that aren't covered, I think, directly is be physically active. But hopefully, students can really get their academic skills and their learning developed, then they'll have more time to go and be physically active. So for me, it ticks off all the 5 steps to well-being.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Gita, if we come to you next.
My take-home tip is for my colleagues who lead PAL in their department or school. I would like to emphasize the importance of the role of the academic lead and how our commitment and passion for PAL influences aspiring student leaders, which ultimately results in a successful scheme. Students run this scheme for students, while the academic lead oversees the process and steps in when required. However, leader must feel fully supported by the academic lead, and that someone is there backing them up and tackling issues when they need help. As academics, we need to inspire leaders and inform them that we value their contribution and we know how vital their role is. This is a genuine student-staff partnership, and we need to consider these leaders as our colleagues who we work with.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gita. Rachel, if I come to you next.
Yeah, I would say my tip is just to stay curious and to constantly horizon scan and take advantage of opportunities. So if we use PAL as an example, students will gain so much from it, but as it is, but just thinking about the networks that they'll create and how to kind of harness those networks and how to use them to the best of their advantage. But more generally, just, that horizon scanning piece and curiosity that will just support them in so many ways and give them new creative ideas to move forward with.
And Kate, if we finish with yourself.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about collaboration. And I suppose it's for wider university colleagues here, if they can identify an area or a particular school subject area module where they think that peer-to-peer support could be useful, reach out to us and we can work with them to get that implemented next year. I think peer-to-peer provision is so important and something that we should do more of. So yeah, any opportunity to do more of it.
Thanks for your time today. It's been really good to speak. Well, it was great to hear from colleagues there from the university and discussing PAL. It's clear that this cohort has obviously been through a tough time with the pandemic, and this strategy is designed to provide any additional support that they might need. I really like the idea of the students in the higher years gaining skills and experiences that they can use at interview. So it's not just the first years that get a lot out of peer-assisted learning, but so do those assisting them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was what Rachel was saying about how the whole concept of peer-assisted learning is that instead of them being passive recipients of knowledge, PAL focuses on that kind of co-exploration, taking ownership of their learning and accountability. And as you're saying, they're all crucial skills for the future for those final year students, as well as the first years themselves. If you'd like to take your thinking further about this key topic, we've added some further resources to the website on a specific podcast reading list, and you can access that at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. We also love to hear what you think about each episode, so please do tweet us at LiveUniAcademy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt and at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
And we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you are an Apple user, please do take the time to review our show, as it really will help others find us. Bye for now.